Today we're jumping into, well, what feels like an academic battlefield.
It really is.
We're asking a question that, gets right to the core of how we understand history. When we take modern Western theories, psychological theories, and apply them backwards to ancient Indian texts, are we actually finding some new insight, or are we just creating a huge distortion?
And that's exactly the question at the heart of the critique we're looking at. It's from Dr. Madhavi Kolhatkar, and it is a very sharp and detailed argument.
Who is she targeting?
She's focusing on some really prominent Western indologists, people like Paul Courtwright and Robert Goldman, and the charge is that they're misapplying Freudian psychoanalysis.
Specifically the Oedipus complex.
Well, specifically the Oedipus complex, and applying it to Vedic and Puranic literature where she argues it just doesn't fit.
Okay, so for everyone listening, the one thing you really need to hold on to for this whole discussion is the key difference between two things that sound the same but are not. First, the Oedipus legend. That's the actual Greek story, the tragedy of accidental transgression. It's all about fate.
And then you have the Oedipus complex. That's Freud's theory. It's all about subconscious desire, jealousy, hostility, completely different concepts.
But they get mixed up constantly.
All the time. And this isn't just an academic debate for Kolhatkar. She's very clear about the cultural stakes here. She actually says that this kind of misrepresentation is, and this is a quote, hurting to the emotional Indians.
Wow.
Yeah, and that it creates disgust. So you can feel the passion behind this critique. It's about protecting sacred texts from what she sees as a distorting foreign lens.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we need to start with some context. Indian culture, its stories, its philosophy, it traveled for centuries, right?
For centuries. And it was assimilated all over Eastern and Far Eastern Asia, mostly without this kind of distortion, even in Europe for a long time.
But something changed. The source material points to the 19th century.
That's the turning point. From then on, the critique argues certain Western scholars, particularly in the US and Germany, have just consistently misunderstood, misinterpreted, and misrepresented these texts.
Which brings us right to the first example. Paul Courtwright's work on Ganesha.
Exactly. Kolhatkar reviews his book, and she hones in on a specific translation he uses to build his Freudian case.
What was it?
It's about Shiva. Courtwright quotes Ganesha's mother, Parvati, supposedly saying that Shiva is a notorious womanizer.
Okay, that's a pretty strong character trait.
It is. But Kolhatkar goes back to the text, to the translation by Tugger, and finds something very different.
What does it actually say?
It says Shiva is Gangi El, enamored of woman of white complexion.
Wait, hold on. That's a world of difference.
It's huge.
Notorious womanizer is this universal, timeless psychological flaw. But being enamored of woman of white complexion is specific. It's almost geographical.
Exactly. And that shift is what allows for the psychoanalytic leap. And the analysis that Courtwright builds on this is, well, it's what Kolhatkar finds so insulting.
What does he say?
He apparently labels the elephant-headed deity Ganesha as yuck, and then interprets his most famous features, the flashy trump and the broken tusk, as direct symbols of the male generative organ.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't that the whole point of psychoanalysis? To read between the lines? To find the subconscious meaning that the original authors couldn't, articulate themselves?
That's the argument, sure. But Kolhatkar's rebuttal is really fundamental. She says that the authors of the Puranas are very frank and open.
So if they meant to include sexual symbolism,
they would have just said it. They do it all the time in other places. So since they didn't express those ideas about Ganesha, she argues that scholars are just forcing modern ideas onto ancient texts. You have to study a culture's concept of God from within that culture.
Right. You can't just import a completely foreign framework. Okay, so that's Courtwright. The critique against Robert Goldman is a little different. It's less about specific symbols and more about the entire concept of the Oedipus complex itself.
Yes, this is about his work on the great Sanskrit epics, the Ramayana and Mahabharata.
How does he start his argument?
Well, funnily enough, he starts by saying how hard it is to find the Oedipal theme. He even quotes another professor, A.K. Ramanujan, who said he found very little that looked like the Sophocles play in all of Indian myth.
So he admits it's rare.
He does, but then he tries to pivot. He suggests that, well, maybe the positive Oedipal episodes, the really obvious son-father aggression and son-mother libido are what's rare in India.
That right there. That's the confusion, isn't it?
That's the exact moment of confusion. He conflates the legend with the complex. He's looking for a carbon copy of the Greek story, a son who literally kills his father and marries his mother, and when he doesn't find it, he starts psychoanalyzing other things. It's a total conceptual mismatch.
And the prime example of this is his analysis of Arjuna and Bhishma in the Mahabharata.
Oh, he goes really far with this one. He claims that Arjuna's death later on is actually a punishment for patricide.
For patricide. Bhishma isn't his father.
Not biologically, no. But Goldman frames him as the father figure. So he claims that when Arjuna kills Bhishma, he's committing that primal crime, murdering the father. He even cites a specific verse to back this up.
And this is where we have to go back to the text. What does that verse actually say?
Kolhatkar's translation is very clear. It has absolutely no reference to patricide. None. Zero.
So what does it say?
It says that Arjuna killed Bhishma with a dharma.
A dharma. For anyone not deep into Sanskrit, what does that mean? It's not murder.
Yeah, not at all. It means in an improper way, against the rules of combat. He used Shikundin as a shield. It's a tactical foul, a moral breach on the battlefield.
A rules violation, not a primal Oedipal crime.
Exactly. But that doesn't stop Goldman. He continues his analysis, saying Arjuna used the effeminate Shikundin as a shield.
And here comes the symbolic leap.
A huge one. He argues that Shikundin, who for Bhishma remains a woman, must represent the missing mother.
Wow.
So therefore, Arjuna is the jealous son who strikes down the father, Bhishma, to claim the mother Shikundin for himself.
I mean, that chain of symbolism is just not in the text, is it?
Not according to this critique. It's presented as the very definition of academic distortion, reading things in that aren't there.
Which is why we have to pause here and really, finally, separate these two ideas for good, because this is where it gets super interesting. Let's define Oedipus the man first.
Let's do it. So, the Oedipus legend, the Greek myth. The key thing to remember is that this is a tragedy of fate and pure accident.
A prophecy says he'll kill his father, King Laius. He leaves home to avoid it.
And in a tragic irony, he kills Laius on the road anyway, in a random argument, with no idea who he is.
Then he gets to Thebes, solves the Sphinx's riddle, and as a reward, he marries the queen, Jocasta.
Who is, of course, his mother, but again, he has no idea.
And this is the crucial part. He has no bad feelings toward his father before the act. No conscious attraction to his mother. It was an accident.
A cosmic-level accident. And when the truth comes out, he's horrified. He's filled with sorrow and repentance, and he blinds himself. The key is remorse.
Okay, now let's contrast that with Freud's theory, the Oedipus complex.
A totally different thing. This is an internal psychological drama. It's about a young boy who becomes unconsciously sexually attached to his mother.
And because of that, he feels hostile toward his father.
Exactly. The father is a rival who needs to be displaced. That's where all the feelings of jealousy, envy, and rivalry come from. It's defined by those feelings.
So the legendary Oedipus didn't actually have an Oedipus complex.
He didn't. He wasn't jealous or hostile. The source material says naming the complex after him is very unfair. The name itself is just misleading.
Okay, so with that distinction crystal clear, it turns out that stories like the Oedipus legend, that accidental, repentant type of story, they actually do exist in Indian literature.
They absolutely do, which shows the sages understood this theme of fate and repentance perfectly well.
Like the story of Siddhartha and Mahi.
From the Gautamari Mahatmya, yeah. Siddhartha is this brilliant Brahmin who completely unknowingly marries his own mother, Mahi.
What happens when they find out?
He does exactly what the legend archetype suggests. He's overcome with repentance and sorrow, he confesses, and he's absolved of his sin by bathing in the holy river. Repentance is the key.
And then there's that other, even more complicated story from the Jain Mahakavya.
Oh, the one about Kusuma and Kusumadatta. That one is a real mind-bender.
They're separated twins who unknowingly marry each other.
And if that wasn't enough, the brother, Kusumadatta, then unknowingly marries his own mother, Kusumasena.
The family tree must be a wreath at that point.
It's unbelievable. And it's captured in this amazing quote when the nun, who is the original twin sister, explains the situation to her brother's son.
Right, she gives this explanation that you almost need a whiteboard to figure out.
She says, and this is just incredible, "Child, you are my brother-in-law. My husband begot you, and so that makes you also my child. Your father is the child of my mother's husband, which makes you my uncle."
Can we just pause on that? That's amazing.
It's a total knot of relations.
It proves the authors were not shying away from this stuff. But, crucially, what happens at the end?
When he realizes what he's done, he goes into the forest and does penance. The mother also repents. So again, it's that same pattern. accident, discovery, repentance, absolution.
These stories clearly do not reflect the Freudian complex. There's
Yeah.
no conscious desire, no hostility.
Not at all. Which means the claim that the Oedipal theme is rare in India must be based on only looking for the accidental legend type of story.
And this brings us to the pivotal piece of evidence that Kolhatkar presents. The actual complex, the conscious desire and hostility, was already documented in ancient Vedic literature.
This is the mic drop moment of the critique, really. We have to turn to the Kutsa myth from the Jaiminiya Brahmana.
A Vedic text, so very old.
Very, very old. And it completely counters the idea that Indian literature lacks these themes of aggression and desire.
So tell us the story of Kutsa.
Okay. Kutsa is the son of the great god Indra. He serves as Indra's charioteer, and he is, quote, caught red-handed with his mother, Shachi, who is Indra's wife.
Okay, so not an accident.
Not an accident. And what happens next proves it was a conscious pursuit.
What does Indra do?
Indra tries to stop it. He takes steps to distinguish Kutsa from himself. He makes him bald and puts freckles between his shoulders so his wife can tell them apart.
But Kutsa doesn't stop.
He consciously overcomes it. He covers his bald head with his charioteer gear, covers the marks, and goes to Shachi again and again. And her defense, she just says she can't distinguish them.
Which sounds a little suspicious.
It does. It leaves the door open to the idea that she was maybe even complicit.
And unlike the other stories, this one does not end in shame and repentance.
Not at all. Kutsa is separated from them. He's given his own kingdom, but he holds on to this hostility toward his father.
He maintains a grudge.
A huge one. Once he's king, he becomes rude to Indra and actually bans sacrifice to the gods in his kingdom. It's this massive act of political and spiritual defiance.
That is genuinely staggering. So you have a figure who isn't sorry at all. He's described as a shameless and arrogant son. He actively undermines his father's entire cosmic order.
And that brings us full circle. The Kutsa story has every single feature of the Freudian Oedipus complex.
The attraction to the mother.
Check.
The jealousy and rivalry with the father.
Check.
And the continued enmity and defiance long after the fact.
Double check. The ancient Indian sages were clearly aware of this exact psychological dynamic. They wrote it down in a foundational Vedic text.
So what does this all mean then? If this phenomenon was already documented in the Jaiminiya Brahmana, a text that's centuries older than the Greek play, let alone Freud, isn't it an anachronism to call it the Oedipus complex?
It's completely anachronistic. The source material makes this point so strongly. It suggests that for almost any new idea in Western psychology, you can probably find a parallel already sitting there in ancient Indian thought.
The sages clearly understood the difference between an accidental transgression and conscious hostility. They had myths for both.
They did. You have the repentant accident type with Siddhartha and Kusuma, and you have the shameless defiance type with Kutsa.
So since the Kutsa myth actually represents the core of Freud's idea, the conscious desire and antagonism way better than the Oedipus legend ever did.
We're left with one final, pretty provocative thought from Dr. Kolhatkar's critique.
And it's a powerful one. Maybe the complex should be renamed to actually reflect the literary precedent that truly embodies it.
It should be called the Kutsa complex, or maybe even the Katsa-Shachi complex, to include the mother.
It really leaves a question for you, our listener, to think about. What other big ideas that were already described perfectly well in ancient thought, are we misnaming today? All because we just sort of default to modern frameworks without questioning where they came from.
Sometimes, really understanding an idea means going back and questioning the origin story of the knowledge itself.